12. It's backwards. It's backwards for everybody, I'm sure. Welcome to Hacks Uncode to number 12, or if that was backwards for you, 2-1. I'm host BTO Pro on the Twitter webs and everywhere else, lead developer on the hackstheweb.org project. This week we're going to be talking about Hack CMS, Hax 11D, static publishing in general, some UX feedback on Hacks from the community, and end off with whatever interesting thing Nikki's working on, because she kind of teased before we started recording, like, if you give me enough time, then I'll actually get fill in the blank done to show. So with that, I'm gonna jump in. We had an awesome pre-conversation, so if you ever want to get on the show, make sure that you go to bit.ly/hackslack. That'll get you into our Slack channel. We publicize what the URL is to jump into this Zoom call shortly before it launches. That way we don't get any Zoom bombers on time. So with that, first topic is this weird thing that Mike and I were arguing about this week. So what is there to argue about? Mike's been working on this interesting project called Hax 11D. It's come up on a few previous shows, and we're sort of left at a point at times where we're like, I don't really know where this fits in our world, but it seems interesting, so we should work on it. And it's so interesting that Mike and I got in a violent argument about it, and he deleted the repo, which is a new form of rage quit, I must say, Mike. That was fantastic. But so why there's such a major misunderstanding about what this is and what we've been trying to do with it can really just be summed up in how complex Hack CMS is, as far as the layers you need to understand to even get into it. So let's start at what Hack CMS is and what we're trying to, I think, abstract from it into Hax 11D. So this is Hack CMS, or I'd say this is what we think Hack CMS is. I don't want to be as confident to say that this is actually Hack CMS at this point. So it's these little tiny sites. And so with these little tiny sites, I go to Hack CMS, and you see a folder structure like this. There's a bunch of code that you download, and it's basically calling up via index.php. I can load that one up real quick. Doing some minor configuration checks to make sure it has configuration. And then all of the heavy lifting is in a single web component, right? So it's an extremely front-end heavy app. There's very little going on in quote unquote Hack CMS as far as an application that you go to. All of the heavy lifting really is involved in taking these files. So whenever a user goes and they go to the front-end site, and then we say Hax 11D comparison, and I will say that this is a documentation theme for the show 12 today. Okay, so I create a site, and then it ends up refreshing our dashboard and go, okay, well, what the heck just happened? So what it's doing is it's going to this boilerplate directory, taking this site folder, effectively copying this and applying some template logic to it, EJS templating, to then go back, and it copies those files into sites. And then I should have something that's similar to the name that I gave it, Hax 11D comparison, right? So it makes it a nice machine readable name. And then it has dumped these files in. So that then when I click on Hax 11D comparison, it's going to load me a site. So this is a Hack CMS site. And then I have my outlining tools, page 1, page 2, page 3, stuff, things. And I did a lot of cleanup in the logic so that this will now safely work to generate me an outline. So I can rapidly generate content outlines. I can write lots of text, all that fun stuff that Hax provides. I can even disable the responsive layout thing so that it does what people expect it to do, and hit save. And what the big deal from our perspective is with this is every operation is kind of back traceable to this going into the pages folder. And then I had a conversation last week about how, okay, these used to be human readable, had to change that because of some sophistications in the way items get moved around. So we were able to clean that stuff up. However, ultimately every file is tied back to just a .html, index.html in this case, which if I inspect, move this over, There isn't even this body attribute. It's literally just, there it is. There's the grid point. I got lucky and I clicked on the right file with the file hash. So there's the grid plate, right? That's the tag that I just wrote. And the big deal with Hax is that this is portable. And the big deal with Hack CMS is it's writing to static files so that this is portable, it can move everywhere else. I think we're on the same page with that as far as scope. So where does Hax 11D fit in? So Hax 11D, and it's built on top of 11D, right? So 11D is a simple static site generator. And where Rage Quit came in is I read this and I said, yeah, but Mike, we have routing. I don't understand where the routing is coming from. And it's because Mike has built a separate server that launches with your Hax 11D server. Correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, Mike. That then is handling the routing so that you can dynamically save a page and it rewrites the file in Hax 11D, and Hax 11D generates a static site. So we kind of have two ways, like if you think of what I just showed with Hack CMS and the relation to the file structure, it's taking these files, it's effectively rewriting them, and then it's doing some front-end orchestration to edit files. That's very similar to what the scope of Hax 11D is. We've been confused, to be perfectly honest. We've been confused as to like, what is it that we're building these kind of similar things? So I think now it's becoming more clear to me what this is. So let me fire up Hax 11D. And this is available on github.com/elmsln/Hax11D. And it's a mashup. I better start that repo. So it's a mashup of the Hax editor experience and 11D. And what I'm going to show is that it can actually be used to generate Hack CMS sites that are completely valid and work in the same exact way as they would have if they were made by Hack CMS, which is why I'm saying the word Hack CMS needs other words, because it's an overloaded term somehow. So in Hax 11D, I'm going to do, imagine I already did yarn install. So I'll do yarn start. And so I'm going to get into some serious caching issues. So I'm going to have to go into network and disable cache and do some super refreshes at times here. But I will do that. And we have a Hack CMS looking site. So this should remind you of the hackstheweb.org theme, because it is. So what's happening here, and we've got pages, right? And Nikki's, this is inspired by Nikki, is this I bring you the death thing, because she's always got cat memes and things, and I love that one for the meme maker. But so this is Hack CMS. And it's got pages that look like Hack CMS, and I can go here and I can refresh, and let me do the super refresh. Oh, it's giving me the old one, Potter. Getting some serious caching issues. You can see the old version of the site there.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to do the demo.
That's perfectly fine. So I'll have to look at the template file. I'll show you in a second what it's doing. But so 11D is more or less compiling and writing static files. So what's happening is it's reading off of this data file here, that's settings.js. And so in here, imagine like let's say you're like a hacker developer, that you don't know web components, you can't necessarily make new ones, but you could leverage ones that exist, you know HTML, and you could edit this JSON blob, right? You are probably more of a power user than the person that's going through a UI and clicking and having to modify things and not knowing what the files are. You actually want to know what the files are and touch them. So think of Hax 11D as more of like a templated Git repo that you would stamp it out as your own template and take it and run and do whatever. So this file is influencing how Hax 11D presents itself. So for example, if I were to change this, and I know the name of this to be the Learn To theme, but if I were to change this to Hax or Slevin, because I know that that's the name of one of the other projects, it should rebuild. Let's see if I can get it to rebuild here. This is a thing, we're having a lot of caching issues because it builds a service worker, and this is very prototypey. Oh, see, it still says Learn To theme there, Potter. It's apparently not respecting my change to the setting, which is unfortunate. But so I won't change. I won't make the change to setting. I'll just leave it like it is. So what's happening is It is building a site.json file on the fly. So 11D has generated this file. This site.json file doesn't exist. The user doesn't make it. However, it's the same data structure as exists in Hack CMS when you go and you add pages. So the way that you're able to manage the pages in Hack's 11D is that you go not under site, you go under posts, and you just add a new post. So the reason those pages are there is because there's this markdown file. You could write markdown here, but it says, hey, the title is post 3. So if I was to change the head matter to say a different title and hit save, 11D notices that change, reruns and processes the files, and then hopefully this will refresh my file. There it is, a different title. So then it's updated that JSON file, and then on the front end, a different title exists, right? So this is more for like your quasi power user needing to know what these files are, maybe migrating from something else and being able to throw them in here. I could totally see this as a, run a script or run a backend job, and it just takes files from someplace, throws them in a hierarchy, and then generates the rest. In part because parent page, cool stuff, they actually live posts, other things, cool stuff, right? So there is the cool stuff page. It automatically was set as a child of other things because it's in this folder. So with Hack's 11D, you end up gaining back that thing that last week I said we had to remove from Hack CMS because of just complexity of the folder management. 11D takes care of that stuff. So 11D is rewriting these files and generating them every time. And Mike can do a way better job of explaining what .11d.js actually does. But effectively, through some of the plugins in 11D, you're able to get the same exact static site generation capabilities as Hack CMS. But it's all Node.js based. So you get access to that ecosystem instead of, whatever PHP Composer plugins we happen to be able to find, because we're definitely getting more comfortable with this. So
the last demo that would illustrate like the huge difference is how you get to the edit state of editing a page. And that is in the Hack CMS land, absolutely everything is handled by this one tag. So that's your layout, the routing, the navigation, and the I want to edit this page. It takes care of all of that. With Hack's 11D, you're building your static site just as you would with any static site generator. And then you're identifying, oh, I would like to visually edit this region. And to do that, you would throw 11d-hacks tag around this chunk of content. And by doing that, what that gives you is a visual editor. And I think is it possible to flip back to the old version?
Yeah, I think I can get that. So I think I think, Mike and I have been unpacking some of this like tangled web of what it is that this can do. This template, so this is a liquid template. So it's showing that if you have a global setting that says to render via Hack CMS, then print out Hack CMS site builder and point to site.json. Site.json is then built by 11D, and so voila, it works. The real raw power, like Mike is referring to, is using this approach. You could make your own liquid templates or whatever template language you want, make your own theme, quote unquote, and edit files on the front end using hacks, using this 11d-hacks tag that Mike made for this. So if I go into settings and there's mode, and I change this to pro mode, if it actually reads in these files, let's actually restart because I bet that's what it is, because it's a configuration file. So now you'll see, because I changed the mode for how this should establish itself to pro mode, it renders this other way of handling the material. So part of this was also going and abstracting the state management of Hack CMS from the rest of the system. So in this post, oh no, sorry, it's in index, index.njk, you can see that, okay, so we're in pro mode, we're not in Hack CMS mode, and there's a site menu tag. Well, site menu tag is a valid tag in Hack CMS, and you only could use it when theming Hack CMS previously. Well, because of the work that what we put into this here, now site menu is able to leverage just the store of Hack CMS without any of the render engine of Hack CMS, which means that you can start to use the tags, and you see, if you can see the link at the bottom, it actually has the correct state management, just like that whole crazy full-blown theme had, but just for this one element. So now if I click to a different page, I have this pro mode, right, air quotes, and it's put the content here. But what it's put the content here in the middle of is Mike's wrapper tag on 11D, right? So there's 11D hacks, which wraps the hacks tag. And so as a result of being enabled, right, if I get rid of the enabled flag, well, I can't right now, but if I got rid of the enabled flag on the front end, this content would go away. Oh, did we break it there?
Possibly.
Okay.
There we go.
There's a lot of caching going because I shouldn't have made a service worker ahead of time. So this is not Hack CMS, right? It's 11D, so I manage my files locally, but then I can edit them using the Hacks page editing tool set because it's a decoupled editor, so that was probably a poor choice of where to put that. But I think, let's see if it actually hits the right route now. So if we go to XHR and then I hit save, it's gonna say it'll probably blink a whole bunch of times. Yep, it blinked a whole bunch of times, which is at the moment an indicator that it worked. And what it did for what I'm saying worked is Mike has this via another server, which was confusing the heck out of me. It actually went to this file, cool stuff, and it actually modified cool stuff. So the front end then took that change, and Mike's other server that's running next to 11D edits the cool-stuff.md file, injects the new content from Hacks, editing that page triggers 11D to notice there was a change to a file as if you were on the file system, and hit save, and then recompiles, and you get your new site.
Right. So it's like you get, in Hack CMS land, site.json is managing absolutely everything. And in 11D land, you're taking a look at the file structure and deriving a site.json from that.
So this site, this underscore site folder, this can run completely static. So even though we're showing it with a server here, you can run a command and it'll publish as a static, right, Mike? That's
yeah, right. Yeah.
So that's a major difference between this and Hack CMS. Is Hack CMS currently requires PHP in order to stand up and be there, and the output happens to be static, and you can put it somewhere, but it is effectively requiring PHP in a server to begin with. Whereas this process, you could leverage all of the tags. This has unbundled builds in it for being able to throw any of the web components in there. And the process of editing the site locally, you just already have the static files.
And so a question would be, well, you know, why would I use one of the over the other? With Hacks 11D, you have to know how to build a website. With Hack CMS, you don't. It's everything is handled in the interface.
So, yeah, I think there's almost like these three systems there. There's Hack CMS, as we've traditionally talked about it. That is PHP making a site. You don't know you're making a site, right? That user audience is like, I just want to put myself on the web. It worked great for my students throughout the last 2 semesters. You know, they don't have to think about design, don't have to think about that I'm managing content. It's just like, click the button, edit, oh, we're good. And then Hacks 11D, through that pro mode, kind of has like 2 different ways of handling it. There's like, I know how to move folders around and I want to make a website because I can move folders. And then there's another mode that's almost like, look, you can just access our store and state management, and you're a professional developer, you know what you're doing, and here, leverage these professional tools.
You're a professional developer, you know what you're doing, but still you don't want to do navigation every time. You can just have a tag that will just render a navigation no matter what. You know that you're generating this magic Hack CMS site.json file that is tracking the navigational structure, deriving the navigational structure off of your file system. And so you can just start dropping these tags in, and magically stuff starts showing up. So like in 11D, and all static site generators do this, they'll have plugins. So 11D has a navigation plugin, and it's very specific to, okay, we'll take a look at your file system, and then you just use this nunchucks statement, and you put that in there, and it'll render a navigation structure. Well, 11D supports like 20 different templating engines. So you're gonna have to figure out, well, I don't use nunchucks, I use 11D. Oh, well, or I use Liquid. Oh, well, that's something else. You'll have to figure that out. Well, how about let's just use web components to handle that? There's no reason for you to have a separate one for every single static site generator, for every single templating language within static site generators.
So does that make sense to everyone? Do they think, like, is there a utility there? Like, I think it's kind of a, we're still trying to figure out how you actually explain this stuff. Because it is a little squishy.
Yeah, and to be clear, like there's no reason why we chose 11D to start doing these experiments. We just wanted to say, okay, with this static site generator approach, we think that Hax is a good fit, because you're deriving information from the file system, and you can just simply wrap Hax selectively around different areas of your templates. So it could be anything. It could be any static site generator.
Trying to make it work in Hack CMS on the PHP side. It gets very close. That's one of the other aspects of this that we're trying to go for is, would you be able to take a site made via local development, whether it's that professional developer Hax 11D site, or it's the Hack CMS site made in 11D, or it's a PHP driven Hack CMS site, and basically copy and paste the folders, or zip it up and hand it to another person, and no matter what context they unpack it in, it'll work. That's kind of what we're starting to try and go towards, is that content permanence aspect. I mean, that's part of why the mission behind Hax and building the components the way we're doing it is permanence. So this is starting to drive it, realizing that that level of permanence. In that regard, Victor, I know that you had some questions associated, or a discussion you wanted to have around content permanence and static site generation. I will tell you, we've said before, I don't know if we've said on this show before, but part of the data structures we're selecting for Hack CMS is not that you or anyone would use Hack CMS specifically. It's that we can take that data structure and apply it to Drupal, apply it to WordPress, apply it to a static site, really apply it to anything, and start to liberate ourselves of their data modeling. They do have great plugin architecture, but the monolith is kind of past its time. So what do you want to talk about, Victor? Now with that setup, it's like heated way up, like you just knock it out of the park. It's a softball about monoliths.
Well, my mind is blown with all of this, because the problem is that it's very interesting how the confusional moment of your discussion together was like, what are we trying to do anyway? created such a creative situation because it's applicable on so many levels that I want to think about it and then come back in terms of concrete questions. But imagine, what's the problem? The problem is that we used to say, okay, we have commercial solutions and we have open source solutions, the cathedral and the bazaar. And now, so let's use a free open source solution. But the process of the enterprise motivated distortion of the open source project that's originally made for NGOs, individuals, small businesses, the needs of the enterprise, which there's no reason to question, it's not a bad word, but they're much more complex. So what's going on is the growing of complexity. That growing of complexity murders open source projects. Every open source project has their own template. So 11e wants to use nunchucks. Ugo uses Go templates. Drupal decided to use Twig. And this and the other. And that's what's driving everybody crazy, is the rate of change. And I have to learn every day. I get up in the morning, and I was going to spend the morning actually constructing something, but oh, I wonder if I should do it with this or I should do it with that. And what's really necessary is the good old Soviet iron, which for 20 years, I don't know how many decades, was the only iron that was ever sold. Now, of course, I don't agree with that, you know, blah, blah, blah. But what I'm saying is, when I began to program, I learned the C. I still have the copy of the C programming language for 10 years. I was a C programmer in systems, and it was great. You know, then C++, and then Java, and then, oh, what's going to replace Java? Ruby on Rails, and the convention, MVC. And then that is ballooning, so that what you guys have done, you've created something that allows us a measure of sanity with the whole, first of all, with the web component approach, and perhaps tomorrow the WebAssembly approach. And I can relax, and I don't have to worry about how long the open source project that I'm using is going to last. Or in 2015, I began to be a mentor and code mentor, and Angular was the thing. So for like a year, it was Angular. Then it was React. React was the thing. And then it was Vue. Vue was the thing. And then with React hooks and context, React is the thing. And then, you know what? What's all this thing of the back end and the front end? It's too complex. Let's just do static site generation. You just pay Netlify. And okay, so which static site generator should I use? Oh, I can use Next, or I can use Nuxt, or I can use Ugo, and you go crazy. And what you guys have done, you've created a thing that can perhaps stabilize all of that. So remarkably, it has to do with what I want to talk about. So I don't know, should I just go ahead and move into that?
Yeah, can you just do all of the marketing setup rant for me at like every talk, where I try to lay out why this is such a big deal? Because like that was, I mean, Mike and I hit the wall when it came to AngularJS to Angular, much in the same way, where it was like, look, we've been doing this PHP templating stuff, and like, if I'm going to learn another thing, I want it to have stability. Like, this has to last. This can't just be this project. And what I started to witness with even just in Drupal configuration is, once the enterprise influence got involved, you started to see, oh, a vendor came in, they gave us a Drupal site, and people over here in the institution, because a lot of us are higher ed, would be like, oh, well, the vendor made a Drupal site, so we know how it works. Meanwhile, we'd go in to look at it and be like, what the heck is the fill in the blank underscore module? I don't know what that is. And it basically completely changed the connotation of what it was. You know, similar the twig versus EJS versus nunchucks. I mean, I had to, even just to get into 11D, like I was getting ticked off writing things that were in EJS. Well, no, it has to be nunchucks. I'm like, what the heck is nunchucks? Oh, well, it's hypersimilar. Oh, okay. So we're really trying to, you know, and meanwhile, that's not sustainable. I mean, complexity adds more people to the tower, and that abstracts away the ability for the novice and the new person to come up behind us and learn these things when they're just building these unsustainable things that, oh, by the way, use a lot of data and internet resources and power so that people can't access them as well. And you actually expand the digital divide when the whole purposes of these monoliths being torn down and given to the people as opposed to the enterprise was that everybody can contribute and everybody can have a voice. And here we are recycling back through this, the same thing in reverse.
Yeah, it's a very complex thing. Shall I go ahead and what I have problems, not solutions today. I would like to get some feedback, and it has exactly to do with all of this. It's not. By the way, it's not a coincidence about 11T, because 11T is a non-opinionated in a certain way. It's open and it allows you to do this stuff that you guys did. Whereas Ugo, you would have to go, I don't know, you would have to redo Ugo, fork it and just do something else. In other words, I just came to 11T in the last few weeks also. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's because it was saying, okay, well, this static site generator will allow you to use different things and it's much more flexible. People have done all kinds of things with 11T, and yet it's not 11T, and nor is it that we all must use 11T, but rather the quest for a stable thing that the cost is cut. In other words, people, it's approachable. Small businesses, NGOs, organizations can actually do it, because I think that's one of the most important things. Anyway, can I share my screen?
You should have permission. Like
okay, I didn't want to do it with them. Yes,
no,
I
you're
got
good.
it.
Yeah, go ahead. If you click that bottom button, you should be able to share your screen.
I got it. Okay. So let's see here. Bring the people down to the Mac. Okay, this here is the point of confusion. So basically, this is my professional blog, a web factory. For many years, from 2007, 8, 9, I moved onto the web and I became a Drupal developer, and I did websites for people. And you'll notice that my last blog post basically is in 2015, because things got so complex that that I just, I was just dumbfounded. So I began to teach in Code Mentor, right? I taught full stack, which was for me a way of finding sanity. Here, I had my background in process engineering, right? Taking lean UX and agile and blah, 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 and blah. And then we can take React and Redux. Oh, maybe it's Vue and Nuxt, and Vuetify, or maybe it's Node and Express as a backend, or Happy, which is really cool, and use MySQL or Postgres is better, or CouchDB. No, MongoDB scales better. And well, here's what I want to do: is I want to say Drupal legacy full stack. so this is in 2015, right? Okay, so I say, okay, no, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take something like a channel here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna publish the whole process. I'm gonna take this blog that I haven't been able to use because I spent 3 years mentoring and so on and so forth, and 3 years went by, and then 2 more years went by. And I want to take this blog, and it's in Drupal 6, right? Powered by Drupal, upgraded to Drupal 6 in 2008. Okay, and I used it a lot. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my confusion and I'm going to share it with everyone. I'm going to do this. I'm going to have my blog back. I want to get my blog back. Okay. So, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this, this process, right? Durable Drupal content migration rescue, the remaking of a web factory. Cool. So I'm going to have, and what I need is feedback about whether this is like too much or would it be interesting to people. We have section 1 is the business requirements. I'm going to publish this. I'm going to do this, and on my channel here, I'm going to have videos, and I'm going to have a playlist that says, okay, here's Durable Drupal, the remaking of a web factory. I'm going to have 24 videos that show the whole process. Cool. Section 1 is business requirements. Section 2 is DevOps and candidate architectures. Section 3 is the design of the API. And I've got to construct a legacy content migration. So what I need to do is I need to take, I hope everyone can see this. Here's my modeling. This is my data model, which will be universal. This is the base modeling, and this will be basically the content type. And so I've got my modeling, right? And so what I need now to do is to migrate all my content from Drupal 6 to a backend that will be an API. We'll take all the data, keep it structured, put it on an API, and then I can have my backend all set, and I can use GraphQL or I can use JSON and grab it. And then what I can do is I can decide which client I want. I can choose any client I want because I have all my data on the back end, which is what you guys did. And because you've got all of the JSON of the site in your little Node.js or whatever you did, right? And then you put that back in 11, but you could put it in 20 million places. You can make a native app. You can do, it's all decoupled. So that's a great thing that you should realize you've done. Anyway, so that's what I want to do. So what is this about business requirements? What's all this for? You know, well, I hate basically, well, I do have some principles. I'm trying to say, what I want to do is in this channel, I want to basically make a learning project for everyone and have a whole real world project. What we don't want are paywalls, awesome paywalls, and vendor lock-in. We want to find simple, straightforward solutions, right? And something that people can do, and we want to demystify it so it's not the cost of it goes down, right? So then the first step, if we're really going to do this, is the business model canvas, Lean UX canvas, and team kickoff. So basically, this, I won't go into that now, but here's the thing. see, people say, okay, I want to migrate my site from the old one to the new one. But it's not a question of taking the old data, right? Because here I've got, in the archives, right, I've got stuff from 2006, 7, all of this stuff. So, you know, I will, for SEO reasons, to please Google, I have to take all of it because I must do a site inventory and none of the links can be bad. So I have to get it all there, but it's not a question of just mechanically moving all my stuff. What I need is a new business model. In other words, what's the site for? What's it there for? You know, because, you know, why should anybody waste their time going to it? So, okay, so with the business model canvas and the lean UX canvas here also, how do we get problem, market, solution, fit? Which sounds terribly marketing and corporate, but what does it mean? It means, it's going back to the cathedral and the bazaar. What is the problem we're trying to solve, right? And how are you going to solve it? And who cares about it anyway? So in other words, what do I want my blog for? And this affects everything you do from that step forward. So if you don't have that clear, for example, you guys knew that you needed to do the project that you did, but you don't have worked out exactly what it's for. But which is great because you stumbled on a whole bunch of stuff that's really valuable. So that's good too. You know, there's an argument for that. But if someone comes and says, a university, right? The university comes, Pennsylvania University, and they say, we want, you know, it looks like, given the situation, distance learning is a thing now. So, so how are we going to do that? Okay, so that's a business model. That's what I mean by business model. Okay, so you get all that straight, and after the first 3 videos, what I want to do, and you come up with a feature list, basically. What you got is a feature list. I won't go into all the details there, because that's the whole idea of the whole project. But that's what the first section would be. The second one is the question of candidate architecture for the back end, using Docker Compose for development, and how we're going to deploy this, and then how we're going to do deployment and scaling. So, because already I'm coming into this 6 months ago, he confessed, with the idea of, I must have a backend. It's going to be my own Node.js Express Mongo thing that I got worked out that I have running on several sites. Oh, but Strappy looks really cool. I think it's going to be, but Keystone came out with a version 5 and it's really, they don't have all this, it's more open source. I don't know. Anyway, so that I'm still in that.
And so with this diagram approach, which this is a really cool way of breaking this stuff down, are you trying to lay out this process for you personally, or are you trying to create, like, this isn't just my journey with this Drupal site, here is the way that you, whoever's coming here, can stumble along through this same decision tree and arrive at your freedom from what you are using?
Okay, that's a really good question. I just want to stumble naked into the night. What I want to do is for people to really see the alternatives. I'm trying to say, what are the alternatives? And this is what you're going to go into. And you need to realize, you have to choose one of them and go with that. And I'm going to show concrete ways of doing that, which I really have done. And it's just a question of getting it up there. For example, can I go with my own Node.js Express Mongo solution, which is open source, it's on GitHub, can show you how to do that if you like. And it actually works great. I don't know why I'm not using it, but that's cool, right? And how to do that? Okay, so you get a Docker app and you got that going. And we basically have all of this implemented for that. So The other way, but is the pros here is I like what we did. It's flexible. I'll probably use it in the future for things. It's made by only one person, and I really want to work in the community. I don't want to work on my own. I don't think the nature of open source is social. I really need to get that done with other people, to bring into, to make sure that it's not just what you just said, which is just for me. It's more useful for other people. And it lacks a GUI CMS because I basically, you know, oh, it's just a question of a bunch of markdown files. So you just edit the markdown files and then it's easy, but it's easy for me because I'm a programmer, but it's not easy for other people. They need a CMS. That's where you guys come in. but okay, so that's what's going on in my mind. And it's all the options you have. And we're just talking about the back end here, right? This is all we're talking about, because there must be a back end. There must be a back end because Drupal has a back end. You know, that's how you have to have a back end. The advantage of the back end is because when we have structured content, which is create once and publish everywhere, cope, right? Then we must have a back end that has a structured content server, serves up everything. Okay, great. So then
that backend doesn't necessarily have to be some level of infinite complexity.
Exactly. I don't have to have a 10-man team. Okay, so how can we do this easily? Okay, cool. Now, one of the things, the word CMS, for example, Strapi calls itself a CMS, but what it is, it's not a CMS. It has a bunch of forms. You can create content types, and you can create content items, but what it does is it's an API generator. It will create the API for you, okay, in JSON. Oh, but that's what you guys do, I think. Anyway, so anyway, how can I develop on my little laptop, okay? And because I don't, you know, so if I use Docker Compose for development, that's something really cool. So that'll be a video of how to do that. I've already got some stuff up on that, which is create React app Docker example, and then we have Docker Compose examples for Next.js and a Drupal backend and Strapi, et cetera, how to get that going. And that's just one aspect. But what's the advantage here? Just regular people can whip up a whole server right on your laptop with Docker Compose with one command. And then you don't even, I mean, Lando is great, DDev is great and all that, but with Docker Compose, you just do it yourself easily. It's not complex, it's lighter, and that's easier. So I do want to present that.
So you're saying,
okay, I'll try to go.
If we put Docker Compose on Hax 11, you'll adopt it, contribute to it, and do all the work for us? Because that's what I heard. So I'd be fine with that, Victor.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Try and get it done this weekend.
Okay, good.
And make a pull request to you guys so that you can, so anyone can come along and say, okay, here's Docker Compose. I got some environment variables, so I want to use Pro or I want to use the other one, and blah, blah, blah. And that comes up. Then it would be interesting to have another Docker Compose for Hack CMS, so I can have both of them running on the same network in Docker Compose, and then I've got a complete system. And then the deployment question comes in. Okay, so we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so this is the candidate architecture. I could go on forever on that. Okay, then what I did here is, and I will present this, is I investigated Strapi. I did an inventory of legacy content in Drupal itself. And I have examples for Drupal 6, Drupal 7, and Drupal 8. Drupal 8 is easier because it's much easier to just put the JSON API in. You know, you don't, why would I want the migration module when I have JSON API.
Yeah, I
And
never
I can
understood
just,
that.
so, so it's just easier. I can just take it and put it where I want, right? That's if I have structured content. So the key here is the first thing. Any group, any university, any NGO, they have to think in terms of their business model and their structured content, because then the API will be structured and then you can actually use it anywhere. Okay, great. So these videos have to do with creating the backend, the content model, the content types, and actually getting the API going and consuming that in an authenticated manner. And it could also create 11T JSON, just like any other way. But that's the whole question to be debated. Okay, great. And then just to make, I just migrate the tags, authors and stories, migrate images. How do I migrate from Drupal? And what I've got here is a whole system of very simple Drush templates in PHP that will enable you to just edit them and just get your stuff out of Drupal or WordPress or whatever. And in other words, I did actually use the migration module and investigated it a lot, but it basically does the same thing. So as long as my backend has an upsert, I can run it as many times as I want. And and I've already got that running. So I have my Drush PHP. Drush is a Drupal shell, and I can do command line commands and get my stuff. And it's very simple to run your own PHP program with Drush. And it had, instead of using bash, it has a shebang for Drush. And then you can just marshal your stuff, use and just convert your PHP array or whatever it is of stuff that you've marshaled, and just get that out in JSON, and goes to Strapi or it goes to anything else that you're using. Okay. So basically, we just want to get well, the blog post and the book pages hierarchy. How am I going to deal with the hierarchy? Okay. And then the upsert functionality in Strapi, which it doesn't have, because it doesn't have any workflow, because it doesn't think that people need a workflow. Just it has no concept of development, staging, production, workflow. It has, you can set up Strapi as a production version, but only if it doesn't have any content, because there's no concept of migrating, like in Pantheon or in Platform SH or in other places we won't mention. You can have your development and your staging and your production environment, but that's not thought of. Okay, then there's the problem of mixing in the database. You have configuration, and Strapi does that. And I was there with Strapi, brand new Strapi, and I'm in Drupal again. I'm in the monolith again. And that's what I want to do, all of this, because these are the alternatives that I have if I don't want to pay, contemptful $300 a month for one site, which is a gangster warfare. Okay, I mean, just, okay.
So how do we get out of how do we get back to where the web was supposed to be?
Okay, well, my idea here is, okay, with Drush, I'm going to get my stuff out and shunt it up to a structured content server of structured content, which will offer a REST API. It could offer GraphQL very easily. Then I will make my front end, right? So my front end, if I come back here to the candidate architectures, right? So basically, the story of the front end is the best choice that I found along the way, after the whole thing of Angular, Vue, React, etc., is with the advent in React of hooks and context and several other things in October of 2018, and all of React becomes easier than Vue, okay, but it's still complicated, and it's still created for Facebook and their business model. But what am I going to do? I know, okay, I'll use Next.js, and Next.js will allow me, and it has exactly the same Ruby on Rails convention that Eleventy has, where you put your different directories and there's your routing built in. You don't have to do the routing. Okay, that's what Next.js does. That's what Nux does. That's what all of them do. Okay, Gatsby does it. And so I will be able to use React because it's reactive. And I don't know in the presentation of last week if it was clear, if people realized that React is not just a fancy way of coming into the Shadow DOM. It's reactive. In other words, it has what Angular didn't. The reactive nature of, instead of saying, okay, this is dirty, let's just, the Shadow DOM, let's shunt that into the real DOM. When you have complex interaction with the site, what are you going to do? Okay, so what I was thinking is, instead of using static site generation, it's much better to use Next, because for certain use cases, you can do static site generation. For other use cases, you can use the full power of reactive, and Next is great for that. But what's going on with that? So okay, but Next is not Next, it's Vercel, and they have their own hosting, and actually it was designed for that. And Next is getting more and more complicated each day. In the blog, they publish a bunch of new stuff. So, okay, what am I going to do now? Okay, then the debate starts about 4 months ago about what do I even want React for anyway? Except that I learned it, and why did I spend so much time learning React? I don't want to go back on that. So, but actually static sites and single page apps are both the same thing. That's what you guys discovered also, because I have a static site. What's a static site? Well, a static site has HTML and CSS and JavaScript. Oh, I see. So I can put a fetch request and get some data. Oh, I see. So I can, last week in the forms, the question of the forms that you guys were talking about. Well, you've got your form, and you can use, and the back end that you use for 11, for example, you can have a simple back end, and instead of paying for some service where you use an async await thing where you push stuff up, the form, if I submit the form, it has to go somewhere, right? Where's it going to go? So it has to go to some backend, and either you're paying a service, or you've got your own little backend server. So with Next and Nuxt and all of these, you can do that. Actually, so there's no difference between a static site and a SPA. It's the same, because you're going to have JavaScript, you're going to have behavior, you're going to have user interaction. These are the things we need to think through and see, how. But basically, what all these videos are doing, right, is that they're saying, okay, I've got my stuff out of the monolith, I've got it structured now. It's now available for any kind of front end. So what front end should I use, right? So now we talk about candidate architectures for the front end. Okay, and basically, I came to the conclusion that I will show Next. I have examples running, I will show that, but I also said, well, let's go with static site generation. Now, I don't want to use only static, because it's the same as the other, because I'm going to have JavaScript, I'm going to have a backend, I'm gonna have forms. I'm gonna have data on a detailed page. If I have a list of blog posts, I'm gonna go to the blog post, and there's some extra data I need, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So the fine line between static site and the other is questionable. So I'm going to show both of them. I'm going to show Nuxt as the front end, okay, and I'm going to show Next as the front end, and I'm going to show 11T as the front end, which was my also static site generator of choice, because the consciousness is in the code. I don't know. It's the 11T has been around for a few years now, and it's been relatively immune from the complexity mongering that has gone on in the other static site generators. So I prefer to use that. Great. So just to finish up here, we'll go over the candidate architectures in different videos, scaffold the front end, consume the back-end content. And then there's the question of which user interface framework I'm going to use, Bootstrap or UIKit or whatever. And can I, and if I use, I have a question about that, about web components. So, and also with Hack CMS, can I plug in UIKit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a question I have, because it's all a question. You make a team, and it makes no difference what you use, actually, because whatever anybody has experience in. So I think that flexibility is necessary, even though we do want something that we don't have to start learning something new every week. So that was the thing. Okay, then there's the question of deployment, the production workflow, and the maintenance, and that's where it gets costly, right? So Kubernetes, and for that I have to buy 700 DigitalOcean droplets and use their Kubernetes system, or what? So this, I want to be able to say to an organization, we can do this simply. So look at all these subjects that someone has to face. All I want is my blog back. That's all I want. But I don't want to have to change the architecture every year, because it used to be every decade. Now it's every year. Okay, so so there are solutions with the deployment. For example, in the case of a static site generator, you can just use markdown files, or they can be created from mini CMS. You can use a GitHub repo as a backend, and you can use Git hooks. I don't need anything on GitHub for that. I can do a bare Git repository on a $5 server, which I can use to do Git hooks. So all I need to do is push. So now my wife is my problem. She's a poet and a labor lawyer, and she wants her site. And she doesn't want to learn Git, and she doesn't want to learn. I'm producing that, so we have all these same problems, not just for migration. So I need to click on a button, and that button will push to staging. And my wife can see she's a poet. She has 4 books of poetry out, so she needs to. And then she wants to put up some other stuff, and she needs to see that. Okay, and then she can press another button, and the push goes to a bare GitHub repo that is going to put it into production mode. And okay, so I want to show this, how this is possible to do it. And what I'm needing here is a CMS, because The CMS is not the back end. This is, okay, so what is Drupal? Drupal is the front end, the back end, the rendering, everything. So this has to be decoupled. So how can we decouple all of this, but still keep it simple and still keep it manageable? And what are all the alternatives? So that's what I'm going to show here. And I'm strongly thinking of web components and WebAssembly as a way of solidifying everything. WebAssembly can be JavaScript. It doesn't matter really, but what's the path forward, right? So I'm asking here a lot more questions, and I'm not, but I will be beginning to publish these videos in 2 or 3 months at the most. All of these videos will be up, the sites will be up, and I hope I will be able to contribute a lot of things that I've needed along the way. That's my objective. So everything will be open sourced, everything will be presented and used. What I want is interaction with different communities, with the community, and to perhaps a group of people can make a much better set of tools where just to get my blog back, you know, I don't need to go through this, right? As Bob Dylan would say, what do I have to pay to not go through all of this twice, right? So that's my objective. I hope that this has been interesting, at least for people. I'm sorry if I took up a lot of time, but I'm going full blast here, and I'm going to be using web components, and I'm going to be contributing as much as I can to the solutions that you guys are moving forward also.
So I think there's an interesting workflow you could make, even just to start for your own site, that would skip the $5 server, even where you've got Docker, you've got an 11D. If you're viewing 11D more on the file management, and then you're doing some minor amount of JavaScript. I mean, that's part of where we get our site.json is in a format we make called JSON outline schema. So that we have a consistent data structure that everything gets queried against, right? And you've mentioned GraphQL, but I would say once you get to GraphQL, you're already starting to up the complexity that you're going to lose people.
Yeah,
so,
REST API.
So that if you had those files living in a Docker container locally, and then you're saving effectively just the output, right? It's running through that process. It skips all the monolithic part of Drupal to go like, I'm going to render the page for you so you can edit it. And then you have your static files. If you publish those static files to the GH pages branch, now you've got a website, and you skip all those other.
Or rsync to Nginx or whatever. I mean, there's all different things that could be done. The problem is the interactive part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I don't want to have to pay Netlify forms. I don't want to pay some form service, you know, and why should anybody have to do that? So there should be a back end on the server also for the interactive parts. But basically, that's what you know, it's not that I need a solution for me. It's that I think that the process that I'm forced to go through here could be of use to everybody. Everybody should know the alternatives they have.
So there's a really bizarre, interesting use case that came up on, God, I want to say it's like episode 3 maybe, with Boston Libraries, where they were using Google Docs spreadsheets as effectively an API backend to allow for like data to go in either direction.
Yes.
And I saw a faculty member present at a conference last year on this. I would say it's hacked together, but it's an interesting way of accepting anonymous student responses where they had to use a contact form. And it was like, you know, how am I doing in this class type of a thing, that their feedback would go directly into a Google sheet. And it created this more or less free bypass of having to effectively do that, right? I mean, you just want to go into a database. If it's, now granted, I'm simplifying it, it's, you know, a contact form or whatever, but I think there's some interesting pathways you can forge that are zero cost, which is a fun constraint to put. I mean, you mentioned Mike and I kind of riffing like, what the heck is the point of this? I enjoy making up ridiculous constraints for Nikki to try and jump through the hoops of for our forms engine. But we do have a series of headless form rendering, headless form field rendering engine. Sorry, that I had to think about how to say those words in order. Where we pass it a thing called Hack Schema, and it generates headless forms for us. So that does all the data management and validation on the front end. So then it would just be a back end, really, is the way that you store that stuff. Or if we had a UI to make the front end piece, I don't think we have anything written up about making front end forms or like a form generator, unless I'm not aware. Nikki, have we made issues associated with that?
No, not for making a form, but it wouldn't be that hard with what we're doing with simple fields.
See.
I mean, you could potentially add some of those Hax fields into Hax.
So we would have, you could make a form, if you made an input field, Nikki, that was like add new field, and then it basically just was kind of an abstraction of what a form field is as far as schema, that when you add it, it's writing the fields schema and then rendering it.
Yeah. Are you giving me another impossible task?
I'm
Brian?
trying really hard.
I got one for you.
No, we play this game a lot. He'll say, wouldn't it be cool if you do this? And then I end up getting sidetracked from other things until I get it done.
Oh, but here's one for you. I haven't touched on the question of media management. Now, and also, people need to have some kind of image optimization workflow. And they need to be able to upload an image and have it split into the three, the good old Google, the Drupal module, what was it? The image module or whatever.
Yeah, image.
Okay, so how do we manage that without a back end, right? So that's a big question also that I didn't even touch on, that has to be. Videos, okay, we got YouTube, but then I have to be dependent on YouTube, but okay. It can't be totally free of everything, but in the CMS workflow, we do have to take into account the media optimization.
Yeah, there was a previous episode where Potter was playing around with an image microservice.
Yeah,
to
what
do
was that thing called? Imagine.
Yeah, it's open source.
Imaginary. Yeah. Tom, bring that up.
That was another one of the, he'll put the link up.
He'll put the link in.
That was another impossible thing. It's just an impossible thing that we haven't finished. But
and I wonder if there's if it's not that it's a monolith, it's like you kind of need a monolith in the end, right? Because you need all these different pieces. But if it's a really well qualified Docker Compose file that just invokes a bunch of little services, you effectively can replace what the monolith has been forced to kind of kludge together.
A monolith isn't necessarily a problem as long as you have ways in and out of it.
we're just breaking
That's really
things
what it
up.
comes down.
We're breaking things up into smaller interchangeable pieces that just happen to work with each other.
Create once, publish everywhere.
Yeah. Victor, have you thought of, while you're doing your kind of like, diagramming out and breaking down the different steps in this, have you thought about including like any philosophical inflection points associated with those? So like you mentioned, Next.js. So if I use Next.js instead of Nux, I am effectively pegging myself to React, which is pegging myself to whatever, which is pegging myself back to Facebook. If I use web components, okay, well, if I use, and even like, let's attack our own thing here. Like, well, if you use Red Hat web components, then you are tied to Red Hat. Or if you use Lit Element, well, that's by Google. And so effectively you're helping the Google ecosystem.
Okay,
like
every open source project is backed by a corporation. Open source is not freedom. Open source is a business model. And our job is two things. One, if we like corporations and we think capitalism is great, which is a valid point of view, then we can, just go that route. Or we can struggle to change society and rebuild society on different social foundations. In which case, the better the corporation and the better the product, we're going to expropriate it anyway. So, and use it for people's real needs. But so philosophically, it almost comes down to there's no real escape from the anarchy of production that exists right now. What we can do is, in a community, we can share knowledge freely, and that's the philosophy. Is to there's more than one way to do it. If what's going to happen is that what was really cool at one point, there's an open source image optimization library. Oh, then they closed. Some corporation bought out the people, and they got closed down. So we need to be able to flexibly move to another and communicate this, and look for new ways of doing things together, working together. To share knowledge, that's the philosophy. And then each one of us are free to support different political solutions as we feel fit. But the question is definitely in community and sharing quickly knowledge, openly, open sourcing everything. And in fact, the reason open source is a business model is because of the Vista operating system of Microsoft, which was the last one ever done behind closed doors. And then they realized that with the complexity that exists today, it has to be open source because it's the only way to get real testing done. So then you get the new version being leaked. So you have free testing, and it's a great way to go. So there's no solution for, I cannot be free of what's outside my window, right? So that's my philosophy. And so my philosophy is, we'll take the best there is and we'll share it, until maybe sometime we'll live in a society that, addresses the real needs of people and not gain, and then things will be easier. But okay, right now, the best thing we can do is what you guys are doing with this anti-coding or whatever it is. What is the name
Uncode.
of this? Uncode, okay.
Uncode review.
Uncode, okay.
Code
so
review, unconference.
So my philosophy is let's uncode together and help each other freely. And then we'll have to go through this kind of, because of the change element, everything changes frequently. So every open source project has stuff. So Debian has Hewlett-Packard, and Red Hat, okay, Fedora has Red Hat, and so on and so forth. So we need to break it down easily, reproduce it in ways which can be easily, quickly be shared. And for example, Drupal, Nejo Rogers wrote a wonderful article about how the way that configuration management was done in Drupal 8 was against people easily sharing solutions. Yes. And in my blog, I supported him. And so what we have to do is some way of doing it. Now, Mozilla seems to want to help more for some reason. It's a business, but it's helping. Okay, WebAssembly, web components, perhaps is a really cool way of avoiding the built-in planned obsolescence, plus the hysterical push towards newer things and to break things down, which is better from one point of view, but not for universities, NGOs, small businesses, communities, organizations. So we have a lot of work to do.
Victor, I just want to give you an applause for that that whole presentation. That's just like a summation of exactly what I went through as well with my Drupal journey. I'm sure many other people are watching this. And really where we land, where I landed, I'll just speak for myself, is going like the monolith is good, but I really believe in the microservice approach can be better. Put everything that you can into flat files. Like you said, how do we solve the forms issue? It would be great if the browser could just handle this, and one day it will with like WebAssembly. What can we do right now? Let's just use Docker for the time being, and let's say that we can easily distribute functionality in the form of Docker images. So just a headless form. We'll just have these open source solutions that like headless form, install it with a Docker command, like a Docker compose command. We'll have, for each of these services, we'll have a corresponding web component that will talk to it. So you don't even have to know how to interact with this service. As long as you know how to put the web component on your page, it will handle that for you. And it really just kind of, it's a dichotomy of, you know, we're trying to keep as much stuff static as possible, but knowing that we can't right now. So what's the best solution? What puts us in the best spot moving forward that we can jump ship at any time? So how do we get all this stuff out of these services at any particular time? Just keeping that in mind as well.
I feel like the equivalent would be diversifying your investments as opposed to investing heavily in one organization. And, you know, as much as you had mentioned about how this ecosystem is difficult for the novice, I think that also it's difficult for the expert that went so far down one path and is now commanding a salary as an expert in one path to be able to jump ship and switch as these technologies shift. And so being able to diversify that and use web components for the things that we can use web components for, I think helps both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, I took 3 weeks off from, I was just nothing but Drupal. I mean, Victor, I know we've talked back and forth over the years at random, but I mean, I took 3 weeks off and I just focused on front-end development to get into this sphere. I know Mike did a similar thing. When Nikki joined us, she was very much like what is all this? We're like, hey, we're all figuring it out together. Like, these conventions are all new, but the thing is, we are going to fundamentally go for a philosophy of never have to do this again. Like, once we
I left programming for UX for a couple of years, and it felt like I had slept for 100 years. The landscape had changed so much by the time I dropped back in. It's you miss it, you blink, and everything you've done is now obsolete.
I wonder, Nikki, if maybe, well, one, we should probably bump things for next time, but I wonder if we could have a comprehensive intentional showcase of you talking about the way that Simple Fields works, because I still contend it is the most game-changing thing that we've made that we don't ever really talk about how it works. So for Victor's edification, we have a thing called Hack Schema. Hack Schema is an abstraction of JSON schema. And so it basically just kind of boils JSON schema down into like, oh, this should be a text field, because JSON schema is a little too verbose. So with Hack Schema, Nikki's made this project called Simple Fields that is able to, and Simple Fields form is a wrapper on it, but you're able to pass this tag Hack Schema and it will generate headless forms for you. So that little Hack Schema blob can be, she has all this stuff to rewrite it so that in different contexts, it can function different ways. Let's say that you don't have a date picker or you want to use the native date picker of the browser. She has ways that you can basically pass in a rewrite and say, hey, if someone asks you for a thing called a date, use this definition and it'll generate the field, validate all the stuff on the front end. The biggest deal being someone hits submit or you query it and say, hey, submit, you're getting back a data structure that is identical to what you put into it. So, and that's been a big deal for us, being able to escape all of these silos, to be perfectly honest, to be able to get WordPress integration with Hax and Backdrop integration with Hax and 11D integration with Hax, is the fact that we have all this abstracted form data. So, Nikki, you want to do that next week? Because that's not a 12-minute thing. We do have about 12 minutes left. You're on mute now.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that's definitely not a 12-minute thing if you wanted me to put that one up.
Did you want to show, you didn't say before what your thing was that you were going to showcase today.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a little thing that I have a thing from that we ran out of time for before I went on vacation. And then I have a little thing that I started this morning so that I would have something to show. So
do it.
I can show both of those.
All right.
Allow me to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Alrighty. So first thing, actually Sarah inspired me in her video, so mad props to Sarah. I have the same issue with some of the icons. As we've been developing things, we're developing them faster than we can come up with icons. And I know she was looking at the Hax menu. I actually took a different approach and was looking at some of the gizmo icons and trying to add some to our library. So in Storybook, I don't have this version up on webcomponents.psu.edu yet, but I've added a new section in Storybook called Icons to show all of our different icon sets, because I had added a couple new icons. And so you can see this is our icon library. We've added a better QR code, a better meme one, timeline, multiple choice, better placeholder, and HTML code. This, in our Storybook library, you can see this is just basically implementing the iron icon tag. And I can switch to any one of those other icons on the fly here. So the code for that is just simply, let me grab that. So if you look here, iron icon, icon dash Hax placeholder image. And if you use that tag anywhere, you would get that particular icon. If I switch it up, let's switch it to pi, which we use for our math work. And now you can see Hax pi as the icon for that. So that's the that's our set of Hax specific icons that I've just started adding more to our library, just because I needed something quick. And when Sarah said that, when Sarah was doing some reviews of our things, I'm like, well, that's a quick one I can get out of the way. Now, the piece that I had left over from last week is that, so Penn State is a big monolith, speaking of monoliths, and it's a very complex organization with lots of different CMS solutions for different use cases. And so one use case is that, being able to set up sites for small departments, very simple informational sites for small departments or for student groups or individuals. And so what we're actually using for that is Campus Press's version of WordPress. And I wanted to be able to see how far I could, because this is a managed instance of WordPress, we can't always get the plugins and the different add-ons available to us unless they've blessed them and said, okay, we'll add this. So while Brian has worked on Hax add-ons, those aren't available to us at Penn State, the great irony that it is. And so I wanted to be able to share the work that we've been doing and allow people to use it within this particular instance. So luckily, Brian has another solution that isn't dependent upon add-ons, and that is these two script tags. So Victor, I think you had mentioned Bootstrap, and I do miss the old days of Bootstrap, the new old days of the old new days of Bootstrap, where you could just include a script tag and then be able to do some HTML markup and you'd have what you needed. And so this is what Brian's tags do. it's pointing to a CDN. It's saying, here's the build file with all of our web components. Let's go ahead, make these work. And so all I had to do to add that was use this advanced settings add-on that was already available to us, so that it gave me access to the header tag. And that's something that, a user who knows enough to add script tags and HTML could be able to do. Add that plugin, add those 2 lines of code. And then the other little piece is I added the code button for TinyMCE. So I do have the TinyMCE Advanced plugin on there as well. That allowed me to use some of our web components so that you could see what they look like. And let me reload this. There we go. So let me blow this up a little bit. So our web components are just, HTML tags with a dash in them. And they have attributes with values. Those attributes are mapped to properties. And the content within them is slotted content that gets applied. The result is that I have this little card here just by saying, hey, accent card, accent colors red. This little area is my header, and it creates the card for me. Very, very similar to the way we were doing it with Bootstrap. But the markup is pretty semantic, and I can do a couple more complex things with that as well. Again, I can make these collapse sections. I can create tabs. We have vertical tabs, and all of those are done with an HTML tag. Just so that anybody using a lockdown system could pull it off. Plus, I thought, well, you add enough of these tags together and use tags within other tags to create more complex pieces. And then you have the video player that I created with the transcript here. The ability to play. You could actually download and print that transcript. That entire player is one of our web component tags. And you can see other instances of it on the page. And to see it here, that entire video player boils down to Alley Media Player. I have a dark theme with an accent color of yellow. If I'm using YouTube, I drop the YouTube iframe into it. I can add my own external captions file in there. Or if I'm adding a video, I just wrap this tag around a video. And so there's my HTML video tag. And what's nice about that is even if those break, it's still using very semantic HTML. You just lose all the features that I've added onto it. The video player would still be there if I disabled those scripts. But it was a nice proof of concept, because what we really want to do is convince everybody in their little silos within the monolith that the real way for us to work across systems and create a shared library of components is to be able to, use these web components. And if everybody can use them, we could have a shared library of all of these different pieces that people could use. So, and that's what this storybook allows us to do is to share what that library is of tools, and all of those are on our CDN. Now, Drupal developers, even if they didn't use Hax, Drupal developers could decide, I just want to use their video player. WordPress people could say, I just want to use those tabs. And somebody making sites in old school Dreamweaver could say, I want to use some of these things. And so now we're working cross-platform, and we've got this UI library, but it kind of goes beyond UI when you start talking about the fields and the video and all of that. It just takes everything down to a tag, including Potter's microservices and being able to do, things that would normally be giant configurations. So that's what I did.
That is going to be a great proof of concept for, taking to other people that need to work with these contexts. Because that's the other thing when you get to institution level scale is people go, well, why are there all these different ways to do fill in the blank. It's like, well, they grow out of unintended consequences. You know, it's not always like, oh, well, I just need to put my name on something. It's, well, we're a huge organization. I didn't know so-and-so was building this and this person's building this thing. And this, like, it's the same with the web. You know, you Google the right word and now you've saved yourself hundreds of hours of effort because you found a project that's reusable.
And now staff that are working across systems can say, oh, all I need to do is use that alley collapse tag. And if all these systems had used across Penn State had used our CDN, they would have that tag. And if somebody wanted to add their own branding, they could take our tag, you know, some other institution, add their own little styles to it and create a tag that uses ours. And they could have the same thing that functions the same, but maybe looks customized to their organization. So that's the beauty of having these as, you know, these little tags.
And you are doing a great job. You're doing the Lord's work with these, going back and reaching into silos that we don't want to go interact with. I mean, I have honestly heard that from multiple people now, Nikki, that we are one of the only projects that is looking towards what people have already made. That everybody else in their wanton pursuit of forward and progress and new JavaScript framework and check out my new
To tear everything down and you have to forget everything you knew.
That we are one of the only groups that is saying like, hey, look, this is stuff that works back here too.
You could throw it in Drupal 6 and slowly get your front end to look like this and then migrate.
And that on and to the Drupal 6 side, I mean, that's a great point for Victor's use case, even of his site being in Drupal 6. One of the, I mean, when Nikki and I presented about hacks at, oh God, that was Nashville in what, 2018, 2017?
Oh God, that was a long time ago. I think it was 2018.
Okay, I hope it was 2018.
Maybe, I don't know, I'll have to look.
I don't know, it might have been 2017. I can't remember
geez,
now.
we're getting old. Yeah.
We are getting old, but whenever it was that we did that, I think it was 2018, you're right. It was, hey, look, this is the best system for Drupal 6. Because technically, if you can load that magic script, as we always call it, in Drupal 6, you can start augmenting your properties in place and progressively decouple, progressively collapse what you have, do it in a more sustainable way to then make it easier to move forward, as opposed to being pegged to all of these unintended consequences.
And you can, yeah, and it will look the same. It will use the same tags. It will be rendered the same. The interface to edit will be the same. And so everything, now all you're doing is migrating the back end. And if you want to update the appearance, that's great, but that's independent of the back end.
So we are at time for today. I want to thank you all for the very interesting discussion. Thank you, Victor, for that walkthrough of the whole, literally every decision tree associated with with moving even something simple, because I think a lot of people, you know, skip over that and they do a lot of those steps without thinking that that's what's happening. And then, you know, especially a new person coming along doesn't realize the complexity of what that is. And it's I've been saying recently, you know, it's not just the simple, oh, just do this one thing. Like, well, is the one thing move this content? Because move this content is actually a really big thing. But if you out there in YouTube land want to get on this show, and you want to get on this show, I mean, there are huge barriers to entry. Let me tell you, you go on Twitter and you go to the Hacks Camp channel or Elms LN, and you look for us to send out a link saying, hey, go to this Slack channel and we'll give you the password to get in here. And then you have an interesting discussion like we had with Victor today. So it's very open-ended. They're called Uncode for a reason, because it's whatever people bring with them. It's not a direct code review. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's whatever we feel like talking about. Usually or always leading into web components. That's the unifying factor. So go to bit.ly/hackslack. You can get into our Slack group, and then we send out the password shortly before the show. Make sure to follow us on the socials or check out Elms LN on YouTube, where we publish these all the time. And with that, we're down episode 12. We've got a dozen, and next week it'll be a baker's dozen. So see you then.